Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my channel? Thank you so much. She took a job teaching a rancher's orphaned niece, unaware the cowboy watching from afar was a millionaire. Do you even know where you're headed, Miss Wynn? Out there, no one lives within 20 miles, and the man who hired you never shows his face. The driver's voice was low, skeptical, muffled beneath his thick wool collar as the stagecoach rattled across the frozen dirt road. Clara Wynn tightened her grip on her satchel, eyes fixed on the endless stretch of pine trees and white-topped ridges ahead. She didn't flinch. Not anymore. I know exactly where I'm going, she replied calmly, though her gloved hands trembled in her lap. He scoffed. They call it Night Hollow for a reason. The wind howled between the canyon walls as if to echo him, but Clara stayed silent. She had left Boston 3 weeks earlier, a place of lace curtains, whispered gossip, and cold drawing rooms where no one said what they meant. Her broken engagement had made headlines in the society pages. Now she was headed to the edge of Montana territory, to a ranch no one dared speak kindly of, to teach a child no one seemed to want. The coach finally pulled to a stop before a wide iron gate bearing the initials M. Beyond it, a long dirt path cut through the frost-laced meadow. Wooden fences snaked up the hills like faded scars. One horse stood tied under a lean-to, its breath clouding in the icy air. No one came out to greet her. "You sure you want to do this?" the driver muttered, not quite meeting her eyes. Clara nodded once. "I signed a 6-month contract. I keep my word." He tipped his hat reluctantly and climbed back aboard. The wheels creaked away, leaving Clara standing alone with her suitcase in hand and her chin lifted against the wind. A man emerged from the barn, wiping grease from his fingers. He was broad-shouldered, thick-bearded, with eyes like slate and a voice that sounded like dry gravel. "You must be the new governess." "Darrell Mason. I run things around here." "I am Clara Wynn," she said, offering her gloved hand. He didn't take it. "Boss ain't around. You report to me." "The girl's name is Josie, 8 years old. Her folks died last winter." Darrell gestured vaguely toward the house behind him, a long low building with weathered shingles and narrow windows like slits in a prison wall. "And her uncle?" Clara asked carefully. Darrell snorted. "You won't be seeing much of him." That night, Clara unpacked her belongings in a room no bigger than a closet. There was no fireplace, only a thin mattress and a cracked basin. She lit a small oil lamp and set out her teaching materials, books worn at the spine, a tin box of chalk, a sliver of slate. Through the window, she could see nothing but darkness and snow. At breakfast, Josie was already seated at the long wooden table, pale and silent. Her brown hair was tied back with a red ribbon, and her eyes did not lift from her porridge. "Good morning, Josie," Clara said with a gentle smile. The child gave the faintest nod. Darrell sat across from them, shoveling food into his mouth. He didn't look up. "You'll find the girls behind," he said suddenly, voice flat. "Stubborn too. Don't expect miracles, and if she ain't reading right by spring, I'll not be paying you a dime." Clara stiffened but kept her tone even. "Education isn't about miracles, it's about consistency and care." He sneered, spoken like a woman who's never had to earn her way in a place like this. Later that day, Clara began her lessons in the small parlor. Josie sat stiff-backed, her hands folded in her lap. Every answer was whispered like a confession. The girl flinched at loud sounds, avoided eye contact, and spoke only when asked directly. But there was something else too. Each morning, when Clara walked Josie to the porch for fresh air, she noticed hoof prints, fresh ones, circling the paddock and leading toward the ridge. No one claimed them. Darrell insisted no one had been riding, but Clara saw the same thing every morning just before dawn. And once, just once, she looked up toward the crest of the hill and saw a figure, a lone man on horseback, still as stone, watching the house from a distance. His hat brim cast a long shadow. The moment their eyes might have met, he turned his horse and rode off between the trees. That night, Clara stared out her window for a long time, her breath fogging the glass. In a land where nothing came easy and no kindness was given freely, someone somewhere was watching, and she did not know whether to be afraid or comforted. Josie rarely spoke during lessons. She answered with soft murmurs, her hands constantly fidgeting in her lap. Yet Clara noticed the girl always sat facing the window, her gaze often drifting toward the hills in the distance. "Who lives up there?" Clara asked one morning, pointing toward the distant ridge as she poured tea for them. Josie paused, then whispered, "My uncle watches us. He lives with the trees now." Clara blinked. "Have you seen him?" The girl nodded slowly. "Sometimes he leaves things." At first, Clara thought it was just a child's longing, but then came the fever. One stormy evening, Josie collapsed after supper, her forehead blazing hot. Darryl shrugged it off. "Give her water, she'll be fine." Clara stayed up all night nursing the girl with cool cloths and whispered prayers. She considered riding into town herself, though it was nearly 15 miles away. Then, just before dawn, she opened the front door and found a small basket tied to the gate. Inside were 2 wrapped bundles, dried willow bark and a bottle labeled with a doctor's scroll. No note, no tracks, only the soft print of hooves quickly fading in the snow. The medicine worked, Josie's fever broke by morning. Clara said nothing to Darryl, who would not have believed her anyway. A week later came the girl's birthday. Josie said nothing, but Clara suspected the day was important. She baked a small cornbread cake and placed a single wildflower on top. When they returned from their afternoon walk, a bundle of freshly picked flowers, lupin, goldenrod, and wild daisy, was tucked against the window ledge. Josie smiled. The first time Clara could remember, he didn't forget. She whispered. Clara's heart ached with questions. Why would a man watch from afar but never come near? Why leave medicine and flowers in the night but refuse to show his face? The next morning, Clara waited by the fence until she saw the now familiar tracks, hoof prints, fresh and wide, leading toward the trees. Without a word to Darryl, she followed them. The trail wound through scrub pine and sagebrush, up a narrow path where snow melted slower beneath the shadows. Clara held her skirt up with one hand, boots crunching on frozen earth, breath tight in her chest. The higher she climbed, the more she doubted herself. Then she saw him. At the edge of a bluff stood a man beside a tall, lean horse. His back was to her. He wore a worn leather coat dusted with pine needles and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his brow. She stepped on a branch, it cracked beneath her boot. The man turned slowly. He was younger than she expected, 30, maybe a little more. His jaw was rough with stubble, his cheek marked with a faint scar. His eyes, when they met hers, were neither cold nor startled, but steady, deep. "Are you him?" Clara asked, her voice firmer than she felt. "Josie says, you're watching us." The man gave a small nod. "She's my kin. You sent the medicine." He didn't answer. His gaze drifted past her, down toward the ranch. Clara stepped closer. "Why do you stay up here?" He shrugged. "Some things do better in the quiet." She studied him, his weathered coat, the patched saddle, the way his hand never strayed far from the horse's neck. He looked like any ranch hand, and yet something in his presence, calm, grave, thoughtful, told her otherwise. "She misses you," Clara said quietly. "She thinks you're a ghost." "I did," he said simply. She waited for more, it did not come. "Then come down. Let her see you." "I'm not ready," he replied, then added more gently, "She's got you now." Clara felt the wind shift through the trees. Her voice softened. "And who do you have?" The man did not answer. He turned, mounted his horse with ease, and rode off toward the deeper woods. Only then did she realize he had never told her his name, and yet in his silence, she had learned something rare, there are some men who do not speak often, but when they act, the world listens. He came again the next week. Clara had begun leaving a basket on the fence each Friday, freshly baked cornbread, sometimes a book, sometimes a note she never signed. Each Monday, without fail, it returned with something small tucked inside, a feather, a carving, once even a piece of smooth obsidian. When she asked Josie about him, the girl only smiled faintly and said, "He listens when the wind speaks." The next time Clara saw him was late afternoon. He stood behind the paddock, mending a section of broken rail with quiet precision. She approached carefully. "You're good with your hands," she said, setting down a pail of water. He glanced up. "Work's easier than talking." "Then I'll do the talking," he smirked. "Just barely, you already do." She sat on the stump near him, watching as he wrapped twine around the rail, knotting it like an old sailor. "You never told me your name," she said. "Cole." "Cole what?" He didn't answer. He tried again. "Darryl says you're no more than an old hired hand who refused to leave." Cole wiped his hands on a cloth, eyes fixed on the knot. "Darryl says a lot, but you live up there. You send medicine. You care for Josie." He shrugged. "Someone had to." That night, Josie cried herself to sleep after tearing the ear off her stuffed bear during a nightmare. Clara left the bear on the dresser, unsure how to repair it. By morning, it was whole again, stitched carefully with matching thread, the seams neat, the stuffing full. Clara stared at it in silence. Josie clutched it tight and said, "He fixed it. I knew he would." Later that week, Clara took Josie to the old barn loft to read. Dust hung in golden sheets from the rafters. Josie pointed to a high shelf. "That's where he hides books." Clara climbed the wooden ladder and found a small pile of worn, weather-stained volumes, Emerson, Whitman, a dog-eared volume of Shakespeare's sonnets. That night, she left a copy of Pride and Prejudice in the basket. The following morning, a single line was etched on the back of the return slip, "My good opinion once lost is lost forever, Darcy." She smiled despite herself. Then came the rain. It fell hard one afternoon, drenching the land in sheets of silver. Clara was preparing supper when she noticed Josie wasn't on the porch. The front gate was open. Panic bloomed in her chest. She ran, calling Josie's name, slipping in the mud as the sky roared above her. Then she saw it, the well. The old rope was swinging. "Josie!" Clara screamed, peering to the edge. Peering down, she saw nothing, only blackness. Before she could move, a figure burst from the trees, soaked and frantic, moving fast. CLE, he didn't ask questions. He dropped to his knees, yanked the rope, pulled hand over hand, muscles straining against the slick wood. A moment later, Josie emerged from the darkness, shivering wet, clinging to the rope like it was life itself. Clara caught the girl, sobbing, holding her to her chest. Cole said nothing. He wrapped his coat around them both, then stepped back, silent as thunder cracked overhead. Josie reached for him. "Uncle." But he was already walking away. By the time Clara looked up again, he had disappeared into the curtain of rain. That night, she found a note pinned to the barn door. It was scribbled in charcoal, the handwriting uneven but firm, "I am not the man they remember, but I will not let her be harmed, not while I still draw breath." No signature, but she didn't need one. Because that night, as the wind howled through the valley and Josie slept with the bear held close, Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling and whispered to herself, "Who are you really, Cole?" Clara stood in the small town library of Elhorn, her fingers trailing over a line of newspaper clippings, yellowed with age. She had come under the pret. Clara's sense of borrowing readers for Josie was deep and stubborn. The article she now held was dated 3 years back. The headline read, "Tragedy strikes Whitlock family, heir presumed dead." Her eyes scanned the column. Cole Whitlock, son of cattle tycoon Marcus Whitlock, was reported missing after a carriage accident claimed the life of his brother, Thomas, Josie's father. The article speculated that Cole had fled west, unable to cope with the guilt, and that the estate had since fallen into the hands of distant attorneys. Clara's heart thudded in her chest. Whitlock, the same last name Josie had written once, tucked into a poem she copied during writing lessons. That evening, Clara returned to the ranch under a low orange sky, her thoughts heavy. As she approached the main house, she found Darryl in the barn sharpening a blade. "Darryl," she asked, steadying her voice, "who owns this ranch?" He didn't look up. "Paper says some East Coast firm. Been like that for years. I keep it running, that's what matters." But the real owner, Cole Whitlock, wasn't he Josie's uncle? Darryl paused, his jaw clenched. "You ask too many questions." That night, Clara walked up the trail once more through thickening fog and the scent of pine. She found Cole near the ridge, kneeling by a creek bed, carving something into wood. He didn't turn as she approached. "You lied to me," she said quietly. "I never told you the truth," he replied, his voice even. "You're Cole Whitlock." His knife paused, slowly, he set it down. "I was," he said after a long silence. Once she stepped closer, she asked, "Why disappear?" Cole stared at the water. "Because I should have been in that carriage. I switched places with my brother that night. He took Josie home, I went to settle a land deal, a deal I never closed because I stopped at a saloon instead." His voice cracked like dry timber. "I heard the horses went wild, the coach rolled. My brother and his wife, gone. Josie survived, but only barely." He finally looked at her, and the weight in his eyes made her knees weak. "My name became something I couldn't wear anymore, so I buried it, let the lawyers handle the land, hired Darryl to oversee the ranch, and I came here to be close but not close enough to break what was left." Clara felt a storm stirring in her chest. "And Josie? She deserves better than a ghost." "No," Clara said softly. "She deserves her uncle." He turned away. "I'm not a father. I don't know how to love someone without breaking them." The pain in his voice wasn't a wall, it was a wound. Over the weeks that followed, Clara didn't press him again. She respected his silence, but she answered it too, with her presence, with kindness, with the simple offer of sitting beside him in the twilight. Sometimes they spoke of books, sometimes of music, once of dreams, hers of building a schoolhouse, his of nothing at all. One night, as the stars blinked into view above the hills, Cole handed her a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside was a wooden horse, hand-carved and painted with delicate care. "For Josie," he said. "She used to love." The sound of hooves still echoed. Clara whispered, "Because she still waits for you." He nodded once, as if agreeing with a voice only he could hear. Their fingers brushed as she took the gift, he didn't pull away. In the hush of that moment, Clara realized something had changed, not just in him but in her. He was not like the men she'd known in Boston, refined but hollow. Cole was rough, quiet, haunted, but when he gave without asking anything in return. That was the kind of love no city ever taught her to believe in. It was a still morning, the mist clung to the grass like it had secrets to keep. Clara stood near the paddock fence, arms crossed, watching Cole saddle a mare with his usual quiet care. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, her voice low. Cole didn't look up. "Would it have made a difference?" "Yes," she said, stepping closer. "It would have made me understand the silence." He paused, tightened the strap, and leaned against the saddle. "I did not mean to lie, I meant to disappear." She faced him fully. "You can lie about your name, your past, your worth, but you cannot lie about how you look at that little girl." Cole's jaw tightened. "She is waiting," Clara continued. "Every day she looks for you in every shadow, and still she forgives you." His eyes finally met hers. "I do not deserve it." "That is not your choice to make," Clara replied. Love is not something you earn, it is something you show up for. Cole let out a long breath. You think I do not want to be her family? I was the reason her father took that road. I was the one who convinced him to go early to avoid a bad trade deal. If I had not opened my mouth. You do not know that, Clara interrupted. I do, he said, his voice rising. I live with it every single day. You think it is easy watching from the ridge, knowing she cries in her sleep, knowing she clutches a bear I stitched in secret like it is the only thing that keeps her together. Clara softened, stepped toward him. Then why stay away? Because I only bring ruin, Cole whispered. I ruin everything I touch. She didn't reply right away, instead, she reached out and gently brushed the dust from his sleeve. You fixed her bear, she said. You sent medicine in the storm. You carve her toys and leave her flowers. You show up every day, but never for yourself. He looked away. She is not the only one you are keeping at a distance, Cole. The wind moved between them, cool and cautious. That afternoon, Clara and Josie read by the fireplace. The girl curled against her side. Clara traced her fingers through the child's hair as she read aloud from Anne of Green Gables. When she finished, Josie yawned and murmured sleepily, Mama, will you read it again tomorrow? Clara froze, so did Cole, standing silently in the doorway, unnoticed until now. Josie drifted to sleep without realizing the words she'd spoken had shattered and rebuilt something in the room. Clara looked up, Cole's face was unreadable, but his eyes were drowning. She does not know, Clara whispered, tears threatening. She just feels. He stepped forward slowly, kneeling beside the chair. One hand reached for Joss's small fingers, brushing them with reverence. I was never meant to be a father, he said, his voice breaking. But I want to be the man who never lets her down again. Clara's voice was soft then, starting by being here. She didn't say with us, but it was there in the quiet, in Joss's sleeping breath, in the way Cole closed his eyes and for the first time let the weight fall from his shoulders. The storm came down from the mountains without warning, fast, brutal, and unrelenting. Snow slammed the valley like a curtain of white iron, burying fence posts, smothering roads, silencing every sound except the wind howling through the eaves like a mourning spirit. By the second day, the pantry shelves were half empty, and the firewood stack was dwindling. Darryl had vanished before the first flake fell, claiming he had better places to ride out a blizzard. Clara didn't ask questions, she just kept Josie wrapped in wool and close to the fire. On the third morning, the child began to cough. It started small, barely a whisper, but by nightfall her skin burned and her breaths came ragged and shallow. Clara did all she could, steeping herbs, cooling her brow, whispering stories, but nothing broke the fever. The medicine chest was empty, and the snow was too thick to ride out. Hope was a wick with no flame. Josie lay in bed, cheeks flushed, lips pale. Clara held her tiny hand, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I need you to stay, Clara whispered. You're my brave girl, remember? Outside, the wind screamed, and somewhere far up the ridge, Cole Whitlock stood staring into the storm. He had seen the smoke from the chimney, thin and frantic, more than the usual. He knew what it meant. He saddled his mare without hesitation. The ride was a war, snow stung like knives, trees blurred, and his horse stumbled more than once, nearly throwing him twice. He lost the trail completely, but he pushed forward, clutching the satchel tight under his coat, filled with the medicine Clara would need, the same tincture that saved Josie once before. He reached the house just before midnight. Through the blur of white, he saw the porch light flickering. He didn't knock, he didn't call out. Instead, he pulled the satchel from his coat, wrapped it in canvas, and tied it to the fence post by the gate, just high enough for Clara to find. He turned back toward the ridge, but he never made it. Somewhere between the creek and the pine break, his mare lost footing on the ice trail. She bucked hard, and Cole hit the frozen ground, shoulder first, the breath knocked from his lungs, the world spinning into a cold so deep it felt like sleep. Morning came slow. Clara found the bundle outside just after sunrise, her hands shaking as she opened it. She wept when she saw the label handwritten by a doctor in Lorne. She knew what it was, she knew who had brought it. But where was he? Clara wrapped herself in 3 coats and rode out, leaving Josie bundled near the fire. The storm had quieted. The snow was still deep. She followed the trail, hoofprints vanishing beneath drifts. Her horse nearly turned back twice. Then she saw him. Cole lay half buried in the snow beneath a bent pine, blood crusted along his temple, his lips blue. Clara leapt from the saddle and fell to her knees beside him. "Cole," she cried, grabbing his coat and shaking him. "Cole, wake up." He groaned faintly, eyes fluttering open. His voice came broken, a whisper of the man he was. "Tom," he said. "I told you to take the East Pass. I told you." His voice cracked. "I should have gone instead." Clara pressed her forehead to his, tears freezing on her cheeks. "You did come, Cole. You came for her." He wept then, not with sound but with the silent anguish of a man who had carried guilt longer than breath. She hauled him onto her horse with strength she didn't know she had. The ride back was agony. He drifted in and out, calling his brother's name, clutching at memories that had long since shattered. She brought him home, laid him near the fire, and covered him with every blanket she could find. Josie woke hours later and found them there, Clara asleep against Cole's chest, his arm curled around her. Even in his unconsciousness, though neither of them spoke a word that day, something in the silence said everything, that love, even buried in snow, finds its way home. The storm came hard and fast, fiercer than any the valley had seen in years. Snow howled through the trees and buried the land in silence. By nightfall, trails vanished, fences disappeared under ice, and the ranch felt cut off from the world. Clara stood at the parlor window, arms wrapped around herself. The pantry was nearly bare. Darryl had gone into town before the storm and never returned. It was just her and Josie now, alone. That night, Josie began to cough. At first light, her skin burned hot, breath shallow and ragged. Clara tried everything she could, herbs, steams, damp cloths, but nothing helped. The child was getting worse. Clara looked out at the storm and knew she could not reach town, not in time, not in this. Up the ridge, Cole watched smoke rise from the chimney, thin and frantic. He knew that kind of fire, it burned when someone was fighting to keep a child alive. He did not hesitate. By sunset, he saddled his mare, wrapped himself in every layer he had, and set off through the snow. Wind slashed his face, snow blinded him, but still he rode for the girl who once clutched a stitched bear like it was all she had, for the woman who had given him a reason to ride toward the light. It took twice as long to reach Elhorn through the drifts. By dawn, frostbitten and gasping, Cole stumbled into the back of the apothecary. "Child," he rasped, "fever. She can't breathe." The doctor packed a satchel with tincture, syrup, and salve. "She needs this tonight," Cole nodded and rode again. On the way back, his mare slipped on hidden ice. She went down hard, Cole hit the ground, cracking his shoulder, his face bloodied. He dragged himself up, clutching the satchel, and kept going. He reached the ranch. Just after sunset, too weak to knock, Cole tied the bundle to the porch rail, wrapped it in canvas, and turned away into the snow. Clara found it an hour later. The handwriting, the cloth, it could only be him. Her heart thundered. He had come, and he was still out there. Without hesitation, she saddled the last horse, threw on a cloak, and rode into the dark, chasing faint hoof prints nearly erased by wind. She found him just before the pine bend, collapsed near a log half buried in snow, lips blue, face pale. His horse was gone. "Co," she cried, falling beside him. His eyes fluttered open, his voice came broken and small. Tom, I should have been with you. Tears streamed down his face. I told you to take the safe road. It should have been me, he sobbed, quiet and desperate, like a boy mourning a brother he could never save. Clara lifted him, heaving his weight over the saddle. She rode back with him slumped against her, refusing to let go. At the house, she stripped off his coat, wrapped him in blankets, and placed a hand over his chest. He was breathing, barely. Behind her, Josie stood in the doorway, eyes wide. "Will he be okay?" she whispered. Clara pulled her close. "He brought you back," she said. "Now it's our turn to bring him home." The thaw came slowly, dripping from the eaves and softening the frozen world one layer at a time. But with the melt came visitors, men in pressed coats, their boots too clean for ranch soil and their voices too sharp to belong to cattlemen. They arrived in a black carriage bearing the seal of the county and the emblem of the Elorn Bank. Clara met them on the porch, Josie clinging to her side. "We're here on official business," the taller man said, flipping open a ledger. "According to our records, this property has not had a legal representative or tax-paying heir for over 3 years. Without documentation, we'll be forced to seize and sell the land." Clara's heart pounded. "That's a mistake. The owner is alive." The men exchanged glances. "We'll need to see proof." That night, Clara sat beside Cole's bed. His strength had returned slowly since she pulled him from the snow, but he was still pale, quieter than usual, like something inside him had finally broken loose and he no longer needed to hold it so tightly. "They came," she told him softly, "from the bank. They're going to take the land unless someone steps forward." He stared at the ceiling. "Maybe that's for the best." "No, it's not," she said, gripping his hand. "Not when you fought this hard to keep it." "I never fought for the land," he said. "I stayed for her and maybe for you." Clara's eyes stung. "Then fight now," she whispered. "Not for dirt, for your name, for your family." 2 days later, the town gathered, bank officials, ranchers, townsfolk drawn by rumor, in front of the old courthouse. A tall man stepped forward, hair combed back, shirt clean but plain, a leather satchel tucked under one arm. He laid the papers on the table with slow precision. "Cole Whitlock," he said clearly, "owner of Night Hollow Ranch, legal guardian of Josephine Whitlock. And resident of these hills for the past 3 winters." A hush swept the crowd. Faces turned, whispers spread like fire in dry grass. "That's the ghost," someone muttered. "I thought he was dead," another said. But Clara saw only the man standing tall, not just with his back but with his past. The officials studied the documents, nodded, confirmed the seal and the signature. "It's valid," one said finally. Cole looked over the crowd, then turned toward Clara and Josie, who stood side by side. He took a step forward, the air held its breath. "I don't have gold or titles anymore," he said, voice steady. "I don't have the name I once did, but I have hands that can build, a heart that's been humbled, and a soul that found its way back from silence." He looked at Clara directly. "I don't have anything to offer you except everything I once feared losing." Clara's eyes filled with tears. Josie slipped her hand into Clara's, and the crowd, once skeptical, fell quiet, reverent. Because sometimes the richest men are the ones who show up with nothing but truth. 1 year later, the valley bloomed with life again. Where silence once ruled, the sound of children's laughter now echoed between the fences. The parlor had become a classroom, the barn loft a library. Clara, wearing a linen dress smudged with chalk dust, now stood at the head of Night Hollow School, the first of its kind for miles. Cole rebuilt the ranch slowly, piece by piece, not to grow an empire but to restore a home. He hired back honest hands, repaired old fences, replanted fields with crops to feed, not sell. And every evening, just before the sun dipped behind the ridge, he came riding down the hill, his hat tipped low, his coat open to the wind like a man who no longer needed to hide. At dusk, he always stopped by the classroom window, waiting just long enough for Clara to look up and smile. She always did. Inside the farmhouse, Josie sat at the kitchen table, writing in a leather-bound notebook. Her letters were still slightly crooked, but her words carried weight far beyond her years. She dipped her pen in ink, finished the last sentence, and closed the book carefully. It read, "My uncle used to fear the light. He lived in the trees, in the wind, in silence. But love called him back, and now when the sun sets on Night Hollow, it no longer feels like an ending, only a beginning." The last rays of gold filtered through the window, catching the dust in the air like tiny stars. And in the distance, the man once thought lost to guilt rode home, not as a shadow but as a husband, a father, and finally a man unafraid to be seen. And so, under the amber skies of a land once ruled by silence, love carved its mark deeper than any bullet ever could. In a world where names were buried and hearts went quiet, one man found his way back, not through fortune or fame, but through a child's trust and a woman's quiet strength. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you believe that even the most broken soul can be called home by love, then saddle. Come up with us, subscribe to Wild West Love Stories, where every sunset hides a secret and every heart has its ride to redemption. Because here, where bullets missed, hearts didn't hit that subscribe button. Ride with us through tales of untamed passion, forbidden bonds, and love that defied time, blood, and dust.